All right, let's do a little bit of final exam 2014 fall exam, final exam review. So here are topics that are on the exam, and the exam is designed to test your basic knowledge of the biology topics. So I'm going to breeze through these. I'm not going to do all of them, so we'll split it up into different videos so you don't have to suffer through all of this. So let's start with the first bit of topics that are here. So the beginning, we started the year with basically talking about how to run a experiment and to run the scientific, to understand what the scientific method is. It's like raining like crazy right now. There's like, so if you hear thunder or if I get struck, call 911. So let's start. What do you have to know? So you have to know the following words. You have to know hypothesis. You have to know what, how we collect data. Theory, not so much on the final. Setting up a controlled experiment, definitely. So let's talk about that. Hypothesis, you all know what that is from writing your labs. It's an sort of an educated guess based on your prior knowledge. It's usually an if and then statement, but it's you predicting your results. Just make sure you know it's not in question form, okay? What else? Oops. Let me do that and that. Now, you have to be able to understand how to set up a controlled experiment. So the two things you need is the control group and the experimental group. So let's say that you were doing a test on car tires, and you basically wanted to test that, like the thickness of the rubber. If you increase the thickness in the rubber of a tire, it will make the car, let's say your hypothesis is, you just think if it's too much rubber, the car will go slower because it's, you think it's too heavy and the rubber is just really thick, and you want nice thin tires on your car, and that's going to go really fast. So our hypothesis is, we can make a graph. We can say as the thickness of car tire increases, the speed will, and our prediction is, decrease. So we're assuming that this will happen, okay? So to run this experiment, of course, you would use lots of cars. We'd use 100 cars with thick tires and 100 cars with thin tires. And the one thing is we need something called the control group. So we are saying that somehow in here, in the middle, we're going to figure out what the average car thickness tire is. We're going to call that the control group. And so this is what we base everything on, sort of the average speed of regular old tires. That's called the control group. The control group is the normal one, the average. So here we have super thin tires, and here we have super thick tires. So these two are considered experimental groups, okay? Don't think that the thin one is the control group and the thick one is the experimental group. This is a range, and in this example, I basically had the control. Whoa. Did you hear that? You hear that thunder? Crazy. So, anyway, let's talk about this real quick. So, these two, if you remember, one of them is the dependent variable, one is the independent. If you notice from our notes here, you have to know the difference between the two. And the independent variable is the thing that you are changing. So here, you're the tester and you're changing tire thickness. And the dependent variable is the thing you're recording. So you're recording the speeds of the cars. And so that's the dependent variable. Remember we said that the independent is always in the bottom? In the bottom of the graph. And the dependent one is on the side of the graph there. So what else? Variables. Remember that these two are the variables that we're sort of dealing with, but you also have to control all other variables. So you have to understand that, hey, not only do we care about tire thickness here, we got to make sure we use the same car. We got to use the same road. We can't have like one on ice and one on gravel. You get it? Those are called variables. And you control everything to make sure everything's the same in all groups. Okay, so there we go. So no dependent, independent, no be able to read basically the graphs that you know, go up, down, stuff like that. Okay, so that's a basic how to run an experiment. Basic ecology. So here are the concepts you kind of need to know for ecology. So the first one is you you have to know that organisms have a hierarchy, either area and individuals, or we'll say area and organisms. What do I mean? Well, what I mean is from biggest to smallest. The biggest is we have the biosphere, which is everything that's the whole Earth. And that's broken up into biomes, which are places on Earth that are separated by climate and Whoa, did you hear that? Climate and precipitation. So like tropical rainforests, aquatic biomes. And then biomes are basically broken up into ecosystems, which are areas that have basically all kinds of non-living and living things in there. So an ecosystem has a community of all different kinds of organisms. It's got a bunch of populations, which is what a community is, but it also has conditions. An ecosystem has, these are called abiotic, and these are called biotic. Okay, so abiotic conditions is like the pH of the water, the temperature, the salinity of the soil or the water. So these are abiotic conditions. Biotic stuff is number of predators, competition. What else? Okay, so that's an ecosystem. And then an ecosystem is broken up into habitats. And habitats are all the different homes that the organisms have. So examples of habitats are ponds, tree areas, under rocks. These are habitats. And then niche was another concept we talked about. And niche is, remember, this is basically the role of the organism. So the organism's role in the environment. So is it a predator? Is it a top predator? Is it food for something? Does the organism sort of control the population of another one? The other thing is, where does the organism's niche in a habitat? So for example, we said there's some birds that are at the top. That's their niche. Some birds are in the bark and other birds are in the leaf litter. They all feed in different niches. What do you have to know about that? The main thing you have to understand is the organisms are inhabiting different niches, that reduces competition. Okay, so niches are awesome because organisms can hang out in the same habitat and not compete with one another. Okay, we then talked about carrying capacity, and that, oh sorry, I forgot, let me finish this list. Also, the hierarchy of organisms is organisms in an ecosystem are broken up into community is the biggest. A community is made up of a bunch of populations, and populations are made up of individual organisms. Okay, so that's that one. So areas broken up in ecology, and organisms as well. All right, back to carrying capacity. So if you remember, that was a graph where there was a particular number of organisms, the maximum that an ecosystem can sustain. So over time, this is number of organisms, or number of species, organisms, not organs, because that'd be weird, like a bunch of stomachs, like in the forest. So here we go. There's like not a lot of them. There's a bunch of food for them. They like go crazy, have lots of babies, and they usually pass their carrying capacity and then they start dying because there's not enough food. And basically over time you get a wavy dude. This maximum number of organisms that the ecosystem can sustain is called the carrying capacity. Okay, organisms will most always pass their carrying capacity, and then nature will control it. Remember, humans, we are weird because we can actually increase our carrying capacity. When we need more land, we just rip down a whole forest. Wee-haw! Okay, succession. Succession was a concept in ecology which talked about how like a brand new island can bring life. So we said if there's a volcanic explosion and you had like this island like this, there's nothing living on it. But over time you get small little seeds that land. And well, first before seeds you get these things called lichens. which are the pioneer species. They're like the first ones there. And then they prepare the soil by making cracks. And these little grasses can start breaking up and making the soil more rich. And so grasses become, over time, bushes. And bushes can sort of make small trees. And then small trees make the soil even richer and better. And then that makes like monster Godzilla trees. And this gives us what we call a climax community. Climax community is like the end, like the awesome, you know, the end, like the best. And so what happens is if we chop down these trees or there's a forest fire, basically a climax community will come back. So this is sort of like how an ecosystem, progresses over time. So that's what succession is. Ecosystems, we talked about how energy flows. We talked about that organisms feed on different levels like this. These are called your producers. Then you have all your consumers, which are here. So you have your primary consumer, your secondary consumer, your tertiary consumer. And the famous example is this is grass and these are grasshoppers. And basically what eats the grasshoppers may be a mouse, and then what eats the mouse is a hawk. Okay? Notice this guy's a carnivore and this guy's a carnivore. This guy's an herbivore. Okay? So I should change those arrows because arrows always point to the way energy moves. Okay? So anytime you see an arrow, it's not who's eating who. It's the way the energy moves. Okay? Now, why is it in the shape of a pyramid? Well, in an ecosystem, there's always more energy available at the lower levels. As you move up, these organisms use up all the energy, so there's less and less energy at the top of the food chain. That's why there's rarely ever like a 6th, 7th, 8th layer of carnivore, because that would not be energy efficient. A food web, we talked about how... if you remember, we had like a food web is just a bunch of arrows pointing to a bunch of different organisms. Just remember, if we kill one of the organisms, that energy level, that energy transfer is gone. So if we kill this, the predator here, the prey will go crazy. They'll repopulate more. Okay. What else? Loss of energy, producer, consumer. We know that. Herbivore, carnivore, omnivore. You know that. And this is really not on the final exam, which is, decomposers is. You have to know decomposers. But a recycling of materials, we didn't really talk about that too much, but we did talk about how it's important that when something dies, Simba, that you become the grass, that the bacteria and the fungi recycle all the organic molecules that are in that body back into the soil, and the plants can use it, and so the circle of life continues. Okay, so that's a quick review of the first 2 sections of our final exam. All right, good luck.